You hear a lot about folks cutting ties with their families, but no one really talks about the final straw, the thing that pushes you past the point of no return. For me, it happened when I was 26. That's when I uncovered something that flipped my whole world upside down. My own mother had been stealing my identity since I was just 14. It all began with a random phone call from a debt collector, asking about a credit card I'd never even applied for. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. But then the letters started rolling in, angrier, more threatening. Turns out there were 6 different accounts racked up under my name. Total damage? 43 grand in debt. Before continuing the story, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss new and interesting stories, and to like and share this video with your friends. I confronted her one night in our kitchen. I'll never forget it. We were sitting at the same table where, years ago, she'd helped me learn how to write my name in crayon. This time, she just stared at me, didn't deny a thing. She lit a cigarette and said, I needed it for us. Even though she knew damn well I had asthma. It was for the house, for your college, she said. You really think any of that came cheap? I had worked 2 jobs all through college, thinking maybe my scholarships weren't cutting it. Meanwhile, she was out living it up in Cancun, swiping cards under my name. That same night, I pulled my full credit report just to see how deep the damage ran. And man, it was worse than I could have imagined. My credit score was sitting at 417, basically dead. There were 3 payday loans, a repoed car, and even a foreclosed vacation home in Florida I'd never stepped foot in. Each account had my forged signature on it, the same signature I'd seen her practicing on napkins for years. Back then, I thought she was just being weirdly perfectionist. But honestly, the money wasn't the part that cut the deepest. What really broke me was seeing the life she'd created, using my name. Fancy clothes, jewelry store lines, even a membership at some country club where she'd bragged about her entrepreneur daughter who's always traveling. Every hard moment I'd lived through as an adult had been funding this fantasy version of her life. I gathered every last document I had and drove straight to the police station. The officer on duty barely looked up as I laid everything out in front of him. Family fraud's tricky, he mumbled. Most folks don't go through with pressing charges. Well, I told him, I'm not most folks. 3 days later, I sat across from a detective, ready to make it official. To move forward, I had to declare, on record, that I hadn't agreed to any of it. That meant my mom would be facing felony charges. And yeah, jail time was a real possibility. You sure you want to go through with this? The detective asked me. Once we start, there's no going back. I paused for a second. My mind drifted to my childhood. My mom had raised me on her own, working graveyard shifts and leaving me little notes with my dinner, study hard, reach for the stars. I really believed we were in it together, just trying to survive. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. I've always sacrificed everything for you. If you go through with this, you're dead to me. I stared at that message for a long time. My whole life, I'd been taught that family loyalty came first, before the truth, before self-respect, even before justice. I looked up at the detective, slid my phone across the desk, and pointed to the message. That, I said, is exactly why I'm sure. The arrest happened on a Tuesday. I wasn't there, but some neighbors called to fill me in. They told me she was screaming my name as they took her away in cuffs, shouting that I was ungrateful, that I'd betrayed her after everything she'd supposedly done for me. That night, I got a call from my father, the man who walked out when I was 3. You don't turn on family, he said flatly. No matter what. I didn't miss a beat. And where were you while she was tearing my life apart? I asked. The line went dead. Not long after, my aunt showed up banging on my apartment door so hard, the neighbors threatened to call building security. She was yelling through the door, she has cancer. Did you even know that? She needed the money for treatment. I didn't answer. But later that night, I called her doctor. Turns out, she never had cancer. That was just another lie. The preliminary hearing was set for Thursday. The day I walked into that courthouse, my phone was blowing up, voicemails and texts from family I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins calling me cold-hearted. Uncles questioning what kind of person takes their own mother to court. Even my grandma, who I thought had passed away, left a message saying I'd never been worthy of the family name. I was sitting alone on a hard wooden bench, waiting to be called in, when I saw someone familiar across the hallway. It was my brother, Jason. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, not since that huge blow-up he'd had with Mom. But there he was, looking healthier than I remembered. Steadier. He walked over and sat beside me without saying a word. "How do you know?" I asked, still processing that he was actually there. "I've been keeping an eye on public records with your name," he said, quiet but steady. "Been waiting a long time for this." I turned to him, still trying to make sense of it all. "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a document, a credit card application dated 12 years back, with my name on it. "You were only 14 then," he said. "You weren't the first. And if you don't finish this, you won't be the last." Just as I opened my mouth to respond, the bailiff called out my name. I stood up, heart pounding, ready to walk into the courtroom. But Jason grabbed my wrist. "There's something else you need to know," he said softly, and then whispered something that made the credit fraud look like nothing. Inside the courtroom, I barely recognized my mom. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had let the air out of her. Her eyes were swollen, hair unbrushed, and when she caught sight of me, she silently mouthed the words, "I love you." I couldn't look at her. Not during my testimony. I kept my eyes locked on the paperwork, focused on the detective's questions and the cold, hard facts. I didn't allow myself to see the woman who used to tuck me in at night or teach me how to ride a bike. No, all I could see was the woman who'd stolen my name, my future. A criminal, plain and simple. The judge set a formal trial date for the following month and approved bail. As they let her out of the room, she never turned to look at me. Not once. Outside, Jason was waiting. We didn't say a word as we walked to a coffee shop just down the block. For a whole decade, I'd thought he'd just up and left us. Mom used to tell me he was strung out on drugs, that he'd stolen from her, that he was dangerous and had threatened her. But sitting across from him now, dressed in a clean button-down shirt, wedding ring on his hand, and clarity in his eyes, I couldn't line up that image with the one she'd fed me. "I'm sorry I never looked for you," I said finally, breaking the silence. He shook his head. "She made you believe I was the bad guy, same way she had me convinced that you were helping her screw me over. We were both played." The server brought our coffees, but Jason didn't touch his. "When I was 17, he began, I found out she'd taken out student loans, opened credit cards, even put a second mortgage on the house, all in my name." I stared at him. "What did you do?" "I confronted her," he said. "She twisted it around, told me I'd done it to myself. And when I wouldn't back down, she beat me so bad, I ended up in the hospital." I tried to piece that time together. I must have been 9 then. Mom told me Jason had been in a car accident. "After I turned 18, I tried to press charges," he said. "No one took me seriously. She was a well-respected teacher. A single mom busting her, but for her kids. I was just some troubled teen." He pulled out his wallet and slid a business card across the table. "This detective helped me back then. He couldn't make the charges stick, but he believed me. Told me to keep an eye on your credit reports once you got older. Said she'd probably do the same thing to you." I stared at the name on the card. Detective Eric Sandoval. The same guy I'd spoken with just a few days ago. "He recognized your last name right away," Jason added. "Called me the moment you came in." "So that's what you meant earlier?" I asked. "That she did this to you first?" Jason looked down at his untouched coffee. "No," he said quietly. "It's about Katie." My heart dropped. "What about Katie?" "Katie was our little sister. She died when I was 7, supposedly in a car accident. That's what Mom always told us." Jason would have been 15 back then. "There was no accident," he said, his voice low and trembling. "I've been building a case ever since. Detective Morales has been helping me." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were piles of documents, insurance policies, medical files, police records. "Mom took out 5 life insurance policies on Katie," he said, pointing to one of the papers. "All within 6 months before she died. They each paid triple for accidental death. Total payout was over $2 million. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the folder. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. "That night," he continued, "I remember hearing Katie cry. Mom had given her something to help her sleep. When I went to check on her, she could barely breathe. I called 911, but Mom had already called them, claimed there'd been a car crash 20 minutes from the house. I could hardly breathe myself. So by the time they realized the emergency was actually at home, it was too late, he said. Pieces of that night started coming back to me in blurry flashes. Mom waking me up in the middle of the night, telling me we had to go to the hospital. The cops looking confused. The doctor's concerned face. Mom collapsing dramatically in the hallway. How do you know all this? I asked, barely able to get the words out. One of the paramedics who responded that night thought something was off. The timeline didn't make sense. There was no crash, no scene. But Mom's brother was the chief of police back then. The whole investigation got buried. He took a breath. The paramedic held onto his notes. Years later, he gave them to me. I felt like I was going to be sick. Why are you telling me all this now? Jason finally looked me in the eye. Because last week, Mom took out a life insurance policy on you. $2 million. Triple payout for accidental death. The room tilted. I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling out of my chair. That's why I've been watching your records, he said. After you confronted her about the identity theft, I got scared she'd take it even further. She was going to kill me, I whispered, almost in disbelief. Jason nodded. We think that was the plan. But she's in custody now, I said, trying to convince myself. So I'm safe, right? He reached across the table, placing a hand on mine. The touch felt foreign, like it came from someone I didn't really know anymore. Now that we're together, he said, we can stop her. For good. The trial was set for April, but before the month rolled in, Mom's lawyer reached out with a plea deal. She'd agreed to serve 7 years for the identity theft if I agreed to halt any further investigations. Detective Morales was strongly against it. We're this close, he told me. We might be able to build a case around your sister's death. But if you accept the deal, we may lose our chance forever. I spent a whole week torn up over the decision. Taking the deal meant she'd finally face punishment, but not for the worst thing she'd ever done. Taking the plea deal would have been the easier road, quicker, cleaner, safer. But it also meant letting her walk away from the worst thing she'd ever done. Choosing to reject it meant gambling everything on the chance we could prove a 12-year-old murder. A case that cold doesn't warm up easy. But in the end, I couldn't let it go. I chose to fight. When we showed the evidence of the life insurance policy she'd taken out in my name, the district attorney tacked on charges of insurance fraud. That got the courtroom buzzing. Mom's lawyer fired back, asking for a psych evaluation. Claimed she had Munchausen by proxy, said her crimes came from mental illness, not malice. The trial got delayed after that. While we waited, Jason invited me to visit his home. He wanted me to meet his wife, Megan, and their little girl, Qley. They lived a few hours away in this quiet coastal town, the kind of place where life moved slower and people waved at each other just because. Jason was an accountant. Megan taught elementary school. Their house was full of sunlight and crayon drawings taped to the fridge. It smelled like fresh laundry and peanut butter sandwiches. It felt like the opposite of everything I'd grown up with. You can stay with us as long as you need, Megan told me, smiling warmly. We've got a guest room. Back at my apartment, I'd been living on edge. Every time the floor creaked or a phone rang, my heart would jump. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. So I took a leave from work and accepted their offer. Living with Jason's family was like stepping into some alternate version of life, one where parents listened to their kids, where arguments didn't turn into silent wars, where love didn't come wrapped in guilt or fear. I watched Jason with Qley. The way he'd get down on one knee to talk to her. How he never yelled. How he actually said sorry when he messed up. One night, after she was tucked in and the house had gone quiet, I asked him, "Did you learn all that from books or something?" He gave me a tired smile. Nah, I just paid attention to what not to do growing up. Everything I do now is just the opposite of them. In May, Detective Morales called with a major breakthrough. They tracked down the paramedic who responded the night Katie died. Not only was he still alive, he was now a practicing physician, and he was willing to testify. Even better, they'd found the original toxicology report. It showed a fatal dose of sleeping medication in Katie's system. That report had been covered up, swapped out with a fake one that only showed trace amounts, just enough to sell the story of a car crash. Once the real evidence was in the hands of the DA, they hit Mom with a first-degree murder charge. When that news hit the press, all the relatives who'd been screaming at me over the phone suddenly vanished. No more angry voicemails, no finger-pointing, no family shame train, just silence. Except for one person, our father. He showed up at Jason's house in the middle of the night, banging on the door like he was the police. He reeked of whiskey and rage. "You need to stop this witch hunt," he slurred, eyes bloodshot. "Your mother is not a murderer." Jason stood tall in the doorway, blocking him. "Did you know, Dad?" he asked, calm but cold. "Did you know what happened to Katie?" Dad's face twisted into something ugly. "Your sister was sick. She was always sick. Your mother did everything for her." "That's not what I asked," Jason said. "Did you know she killed her?" "That did it." Dad lunged forward. But Jason was ready. He caught him mid-swing, twisted his arm back, and shoved him up against the porch wall like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "You come near this house again, I'll have you arrested," Jason said, firm and steady. "We're not scared little kids anymore." After Dad left, we both sat on the couch, quiet for a long time. "Do you think he knew?" I finally asked. Jason stared at the floor. "I think he had his suspicions. But he didn't want to know for sure." The trial finally started in September. I spent 3 days on the stand. I talked about everything, every credit card, every forged signature, every document. I told them about the fear, the betrayal, the moment I realized what Mom had planned for me. I told them about Katie. Jason testified, too. He described the night she died, what he saw, what he heard, and how our mother had lied to cover it all up. Then the paramedic, now Dr. Franklin, took the stand. He talked about showing up at our house, finding a little girl barely breathing, and a mother more concerned with her cover story than her own daughter's life. Mom never spoke. Her lawyer tried to frame her as mentally ill, someone suffering from a disorder that made her harm her children to gain attention. They brought in experts on Munchausen by proxy, painted her as someone sick instead of someone sinister. The jury deliberated for 6 long days. On the 7th, they came back with the verdict: guilty. On all counts: identity theft, insurance fraud, and the murder of Katie Evans. When the judge read the sentence, life without the possibility of parole, Mom finally looked at me. There wasn't an ounce of remorse in her eyes, not a flicker. Just that same cold fury, sharp as ever, because she'd finally been caught. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, shoving mics in my face like I owed them something. "What's it like to send your own mother to prison?" they asked. But I didn't have any words left in me. Jason stepped in, guided me through the crowd, shielding me from the noise. That night, after the house had gone quiet, I sat alone on Jason's porch, staring up at the stars. First time in months I'd really seen them. First time in even longer that I could take a full breath without it feeling like something was crushing my chest. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is a collect call from Mountain View Correctional Facility. Will you accept the charges?" I should have hung up. I should have. But I didn't. I said yes. Her voice came through, empty and sharp. "After everything I did for you." Same old tactics, guilt, manipulation, wrapping control up in the costume of sacrifice. Once, it might have worked. "What did you ever do for me?" I asked her. "Other than steal my identity and try to kill me." Silence. Then I said it plain. "You gave me life, yeah. But then you tried to take it. That's not love, Mom. That's control. That's ownership." Her voice shifted, darkened. "You'll never escape me," she said. "You're just like me. More than you know." I thought about Jason, inside, probably snoring next to his wife. I thought about Qley, safe in her bed, wrapped in love with no strings attached. I thought about the life I could still build. A good one. A free one. "No," I said. "I'm nothing like you. And I never will be." Then I hung up and blocked the number for good. The next morning, I applied for a job at a local design firm just a few miles from Jason's place. Found a little apartment 10 minutes down the road. Not big, but it was mine. Quiet. Peaceful. I started therapy. Slowly, I learned how to sleep without checking the locks 3 times. I stopped flinching every time I heard footsteps in the hallway. On the anniversary of Katie's death, Jason and I visited her grave together. We brought flowers, cleared off the weeds, and just sat there with her. We told her we were sorry. Told her the truth had finally come to light. On the way back to the car, Jason paused. "You ever wonder about the years we lost?" he asked. "What life could have been like if we'd known the truth sooner?" I thought about it. Ached for it. "Sometimes," I said. But I try not to. We can't get those years back. He nodded, slow. But we got each other back. I looked at him, really looked. That's something, I said. No, he said. That's everything. 6 months later, I met someone. David. He was an architect with kind eyes and a quiet laugh. On our 3rd date, he asked if it was okay to hold my hand. Asked. Nobody had ever done that before. Eventually, he asked about my family. It's complicated, I told him. I've cut ties with my parents. I braced for judgment, for those awkward follow-ups. But he just nodded. Sometimes that's the healthiest thing, he said. Family should earn their place in your life, same as anyone else. And right then, I nearly cried. Right there in the middle of that little Italian restaurant. Last week, a letter came in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was hers, I knew it instantly. My stomach flipped the way it always did when she reached out, even after all this time. For a second, I thought about opening it. Just a peek. Old habits die hard. That pull for approval, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally changed. But instead, I lit the fireplace in my new home. David sat next to me on the couch as I dropped the letter into the flames. You okay? He asked gently. I watched the paper catch, curl, blacken, her words going up in smoke. I'm free, I said. And, for the first time in my life, I meant it.